Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the replay. If you're here on the video, if you're watching us on the video, if you're joining us here live, thank you so much for joining us today. It's funny, every time now that I actually launch one of these things, I check like 10 times to make sure that I actually started the webinar this time. Because there was one time, Dean, I'm sure you remember this, that I forgot to actually hit start webinar and I just started recording. And so we went like 4 minutes without actually realizing that nobody was here, right? So
I was listening to you, but nobody else was.
exactly, right. But this is going to be a great conversation today. This is we're going to be having a lot of fun, and I am very glad that we're able to do this. I'm glad that we have Nancy on the call today, and we'll kind of
thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting day. So I have a different background yet again. For those who've been watching the community table for the past probably 4 or 5 months, I've had probably, I think, 4 or 5 different backgrounds, in varying from the couch in my wife's office with this like teal blue sea foam something, I don't know, but now I've got this. It's more music studio, which I particularly love. So
It's not your car either, right?
Exactly, it's not my car. That's right. And fortunately there's going to be no descending shadow coming over time as we go through this, but yeah, so I'm glad that we're here. And so just as an official welcome, thank you so much for joining us for today's community table discussion, direct marketing in 2023. We're asking the question, does it still really work? My name is Ian Campbell. I am the CEO of Mission Suite, and joining me today, as always, is Dean Isaacs. Dean is the founder of Vantage Group, a business growth strategy firm. He works with B2B companies, helping them grow predictable, profitable revenue and scale their organizations. In 2018, Dean launched the Growth Collaborative, a group consulting and mastermind program that helps B2B consultants and experts break through their revenue ceiling and generate high-ticket clients month after month. And today we are honored with a very special guest, Nancy Barlow, who is president of Barlow Advertising and Design. And, Nancy, I'm going to give you a chance to tell us more about you here in just a minute. But in the meantime, just want to make sure that everybody knows, I always like to say we're gonna take questions throughout the session today. If you have questions, do us a favor and drop them into the Q&A section on Zoom, and don't use the chat. It helps us kind of keep everything contained inside of that Q&A. So if you have questions, definitely answer them. We want to hear your questions. We want to get them answered, but just do us a favor and drop them into the chat instead of the comments. That'll help us quite a bit here. So, all right, beautiful. Well, Nancy, welcome to the community table. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. This is exciting. Dean, I don't know how long you've known Nancy. I've known Nancy for, I think, 5, 6 years now, something like that, probably.
Yeah.
And when we had like a 1 hour meeting, 1 hour coffee meeting scheduled at what was it, Racine's, I think it was.
Yeah, that's right. Poor Racine's is gone now. Darn it.
Yeah, and that we had a 1 hour conversation scheduled that lasted for 2.5 hours, and I'm like, you know what? I like this person. I don't know why yet, but
Can't stop talking.
Yeah. So it's good to finally get a chance to have you on and do some kind of talking together here. We'll keep it to an hour instead of the 2.5, but Nancy, tell us, give us as I mentioned, you're the president of Barlow Advertising and Design. I know you've been in the design and ad world for a long time. Kind of give us a little bit of background. Tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got to where you are, and go ahead and start wherever you want to start.
Okay. So Barlow Advertising, this is our 32nd year in business. And I'm a creative strategy, creative design, creative messaging. And before I started Barlow, I worked for a publishing company in Illinois. And part of my job was to be an art director for a city magazine. And the other part was to help support their direct marketing / mail initiatives. So I worked for them for 9 years. I was young. I learned direct marketing from the experts. And I'll tell you, it hasn't changed. It's changed, but the methods haven't changed a lot. It still works.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. That's awesome. I mean, I guess you gotta figure, right? The mail is still the mail, right? I mean,
Yeah, and it's not all mail.
yeah.
It's moved beyond mail, even though mail still works.
Right.
I mean, we've got digital, we've got social, we've got text messaging. There's a lot of different avenues that you can expand your campaign now. So it's exciting. And it's really the direct part is the key, because you have an audience that you are speaking to. It's not mass marketing like billboards.
Right.
You put a billboard up on a highway and your audience is pretty varied. So your message is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, kind of, can you give us a rundown? Because I mean, I think a lot of people think a lot of different things when they hear direct marketing, right? I mean, everything from, I oftentimes hear it interchanged with direct response marketing or just direct mail, or which kind of you just identified as not just what that. So can you kind of give us an idea overall of what direct marketing is and what we're talking about today?
And really, direct response is the same thing as direct marketing. So it's about having the right list, being able to segment your list, creating a message. So the three main things that are most important is your list, your message, and your offer. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get your prospects to respond, and it's really to buy. I mean, I was always taught that direct marketing is sales, plain and simple, it's sales. And so once you have those three key things defined, then you need to integrate testing. So you go in, you measure your responses, and then you tweak it until you get it right. And it's performing, and you can just continue.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The direct thing for me that comes to mind, Nancy, is it's one, think of it as one-to-one, right? Human to human, right? Exactly. And I think that changes how we think about our message, even which channels we pick, right? As you said, there's lots of different channels. If you know your audience, and we've talked about ideal client profile on the community table more than once, right? And you know where they hang out, you know how they consume information, so you can pick the right channel and align that with a message that's going to get some kind of response, which is different to broadcast media, right? You're just putting stuff out there and hopefully somebody sees it.
So what kind of channels are we talking about when you're talking about direct response? Because you mentioned that there are a number of them, and it's not just the mail anymore, right? So what else should we be, how else should we kind of be broadening our perspectives on that?
I would say, in my opinion, for what I use for my clients, the next thing would be a digital campaign. Okay. And I can give you an example of how this recently worked really well for a client. And it was in the mental health space. It was a nonprofit. And so they had in their mind, and they convinced me that they knew who would respond. And what their offer was solutions for someone going through anxiety, mental breakdowns, substance abuse. They convinced me that it would be women that would respond to this. And so we did some testing with women ages 30s, 40s, 50s. And we sprinkled in the male demographic. Well, wow, were we shocked. It was almost 100% male that responded to this. Males 28 to 53, I think it was, overwhelmingly. So then we were able to just switch our creative. We had visuals, and we geofenced all of this. So we had visuals of women that were sad, that were afraid, this was in 2020, they were masked, which created a lot of anxiety in people. And we moved it to men, and it was a huge success. And so these men were reaching out. I think it was because it was private. They were being served these ads in the spaces that they hung out at, the websites that they went to, the social media sites that they visited, so they felt safe.
You know, I love the fact that you brought up ads, right? Because ads have made this massive shift, right? Depending on your channel, right? To a broadcast, a wide message, put a billboard up. Hopefully somebody that wants to buy my stuff happens to drive by.
Right.
But with paid advertising on pick a channel, right? Pick a digital channel, social media channel, Google AdWords, whatever it is. It can become direct marketing. You're picking out a particular profile, particular demographic, even leveraging their search history and what they've looked for online. And so it's no longer this broad message. It can be, it's like, holy cow, this thing speaks to me, which is what direct marketing should be about. So I think it's really that whole sort of platform has really allowed us to do direct marketing in a much broader way.
Yeah.
But in also more targeted way.
Right.
Well, and it really, the strategies build trust. You know, so much marketing isn't trustworthy. You're always skeptical. Should I really buy this? Is it really going to work? Am I going to lose 20 pounds in a week? This is a way to really build trust with people and keep showing up where they're hanging out. And, I kind of think there's a psyche there that thinks that, wow, this is showing up where I hang out. So the people that I hang out with believe in this just as much as I would believe in this.
Yeah. It's almost like social proof, right? Because you're in the right place around the right people.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, Dean, I think we've talked about this before, that consistency ultimately starts to equal trust, right? I mean, we all know that consistency is not the same thing as trust, but in our minds and kind of in the lizard brains that still control a lot of our decision making, seeing something over and over and over again starts to equate that brand, that message with trustworthiness, because if they're here this frequently, then eventually it starts to say, well, they've got to be legit because they're still here.
Yeah, that familiarity. Yeah,
right. Absolutely. So that's interesting. So Nancy, at the beginning, you talked about having the right list, the right medium, and the right message, right? Essentially at the end of the day. So I'm wondering if we can kind of go back to that first part, that right list. Because obviously we all know, we talked, in fact, I think we talked about building your niche last month. And really identifying that, and then because this is the natural next progression to this, right? Because when we talk about marketing a lot, we're talking about just general marketing, and we talk about niche building or niche building. We're talking about just kind of what content we put out there in the hopes that the right people interact with it, engage with it, and then we can kind of move them down a funnel. But looking at it as a list process and actually combining a list with that niche helps us to be much more specific and a lot more targeted. So obviously that's something that we've talked about with that mail houses talk about all the time. But how does that combine with social media and advertising and things like that?
It has mostly to do with consumer habits. So if you purchase lists based on other things outside of what you're looking for that would be common with these prospects. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can
you give us an example?
Subscribe to the television shows they watch, products that they have shown that they've purchased, all of that data that they know so much about us. And so that's what you look for, that you can pick those things.
Yeah. And to clarify, this isn't just available to us through social media advertising, because we know that those are the types of things that, like Facebook, when you run an ad, says, what do you want these people to like? But you can actually look at that with larger lists as well and combine that with other stuff too. Is that right?
Yeah. And, I would warn anyone listening that not all list compilers are equal. There's a lot of bad data out there. So you have to use someone that's reputable. I remember years ago, some of the bigs had really poor data, outdated. data that they were selling. So you have to be careful and just ask somebody who's an expert in that area, and they'll help you through it. Make recommendations.
Absolutely. Huh. Yeah, I remember I used to use, Info USA is one of the big data houses, right? And they have a product sales something. I don't remember what it is. It was their thing that you could get on, but you could actually access it through the library if you had a library card. You could get to it for free, and you could do all sorts of downloads. So I used to scrape all sorts of lists off of this thing. And I mean, and of course, there was plenty of good information out there, but for as much good information there was outdated stuff and things like that. And I mean, I know that they were one of the big ones back then. I'm sure they've gotten better over time, hopefully.
They have.
But yeah,
they did have a bad reputation for a while, but they've gotten much better. But I think a good rule of thumb is if it's free, it's probably not the best.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Very cool. So how can we be looking at some of these at some of these list criteria when we're building our targets? And Dean, actually, I'd be interested in hearing you kind of lead off the answer to this one, because this kind of comes directly back from the niche building process that we went to. Because ideally, we want to figure out the niche, figure out how to build the list from that, and then we get the names that we're targeting, right? Mm-hmm. But there's that middle ground that we have to figure out.
Figuring out who we're targeting.
Figuring out how to quantify what the beyond just kind of the niche of this is what we're offering to whom, and in what way, but then in order to get the names, what Nancy's been talking about is that we can kind of really hyper target down to common sensibilities and common subscriptions and things like that. So what sort of things should we be thinking about as we kind of go through that process?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to do it, and Nancy sort of mentioned it earlier about testing, right? If you can drive some interaction, some results from some basic paid ads, you haven't figured out your message and your audience, right? So one easy way to do it is if you kind of have a sense of a persona, and let's say they're on LinkedIn, maybe they're part of a group on LinkedIn, you can go out and see what they're talking about. Right, and see if what they're talking about, the problems that they're trying to solve, align with what you have to offer. So that helps us narrow it down. I recommend to clients sometimes just run some inexpensive paid ads on a social platform, see if you get any response. Right, they spend a ton of money typically on trying to generate organic traffic, and it takes time. You can get immediate feedback with a cheap paid ad to see if your messaging is aligned with your audience. And if it does generate response, then you can go and you can expand your direct marketing campaigns around that knowledge. So that's one really quick and easy way to do it. I think the other is to talk to your clients, talk to your market, get some feedback there as well. See what's troubling them today. And if the profile of your typical client is the one you want for future clients, get feedback from them. Right? Have that conversation, because recession or no recession, inflation, jobs, whatever's going on in the headlines, it changes how they perceive their problem, and we want to make sure we're using very relevant messaging to how they see the world today. So that's a couple of things I would do to start with.
I think you're spot on.
Yeah, interesting. And so, Nancy, in your experience in list building, is that enough to take to a list builder or a list provider and say this is what we're looking for, or should we be looking for more? Should we be looking for more kind of granular information too?
Well, I think it's a good place to start, but I would ask your compiler's opinion. They have resources that you wouldn't even think of. I use one specifically, and I'll reach out to her and I'll give her a snapshot of who my client is and what they're trying to do, and she'll make suggestions, and they're usually really good ones.
Yeah, that's their work, right? They spend that's what they do every day. Yeah,
right. And she knows what quality data she's going to be getting. I mean, her reputation's on the line.
Sure. Interesting. So it's not just the reference group in the library. You know?
What's a library? What is that?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. The library website, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Oh, very cool. Okay. So tell us, Nancy, if you could kind of talk a little bit about what makes direct mail, or I'm sorry, direct marketing desirable. Like what is the thing that really makes it drive, that really makes people should be thinking about doing it because of?
I think there are strategies in which you can set yourself apart, and that's typically with your creative.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to stand out and be different and be human. And I think it's your offer.
Mm-hmm.
Really think about what would be something compelling and for them to at least learn more. They don't necessarily have to just buy from you right now, but take a baby step in getting to know you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think that offer thing is interesting, Nance, right? So it doesn't have to be for them to get their credit card out.
no,
Right. Sometimes the offer is just to get some interaction, get them to respond, get them to download a free thing or jump on a webinar or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
They're not often buyer-ready leads. They're still exploring, they're getting educated. So as you think about offer, think about where your prospect is at in their sort of buyer's journey too.
and that's especially with a high ticket item.
Mm-hmm.
If it's I don't know, a pair of earrings, then sell them right then and there. Don't
Depends on the earrings, I guess. Yeah.
But if it's professional services, well, they're not going to just jump in bed with you.
Right.
They have to get to know you,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to tell them something. I mean, it works both ways. I mean, I don't want to work. I want to, there are certain clients that I want to work with. There are certain clients I don't want to work with. Don't we all feel that way? Has to be a good fit. So I think really approaching them in a very human way is the way to go. And Dean, I do a lot of dimensional mailing, and that's for very high ticket sales.
Yeah. Yeah.
Services.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of takes us down one of the sort of tactics under direct marketing. But tell us about that, because you do some amazing work with the dimensional mail, and you've seen great response and great results for clients. So maybe this may be a little off script here, but let's jump into that.
Okay. So this all started for me over 20 years ago. And there was a gentleman that provided exit planning for companies. Now, you wouldn't think that you could sell exit planning with direct marketing, would you? I mean, that's a really personal experience. So he did his research, and he belonged to an organization that that was for exit planners. And the man that started this organization wrote a book, and it's How to Exit Your Business in Style. And so Dave came to me and he goes, I got this book. What should I do with this book? And so we put together a program, and I came up with a really creative name. In fact, I think he came up with it. We called it A Book in a Box. And so I did all the messaging for this, and he would send out, so it's a book in a box, and there's a message on the outside, and there's a handwritten label. It has real stamps on it. It looks like a human being packaged this up. And it has all these alarming statistics step by step as you get into this. And he would send out 10 of these a week. And his message would be, Ian, read chapter 7 and I'll call you in a week. Mm-hmm. A week later, Dave would call Ian. Ian would take his call. He would get a meeting with Ian. Now, what I do, I don't promise that I can finalize the sale. That's Dave's job.
Right.
But I can get him a face-to-face.
Right.
He had a 95% success rate.
Wow.
10 a week, 9 appointments, or 10 appointments, 95% success. So all of a sudden I realized I got something here. So he said, I will introduce you to other people to do the same type of thing for. 95% success rate, boom, 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 over and over again. I mean, I was pretty surprised by it. So I took this whole idea into other markets, and it continued to work, and it still does. Now, I can't say that I will always get 95% success. You know, I had an enterprise level client that was a reseller for a Dell product, a cybersecurity product. And I did a program like this for them, and they were approaching a very, very high C-level executive in other enterprise companies like Taco Bell and McDonald's. Those people it's really difficult to get them to pay attention to your marketing. And I got a 35% success rate.
Still, even getting to those people is not easy, right? How many filters has that package got to get through?
Right.
So yeah, that's still amazing. Yeah.
And it's partly that handwritten label. That's the first thing they see, and they're curious.
Yeah. I remember when I was doing work in the IT industry, there was somebody that was doing something similar to that was basically doing this too, except it was more tchotchke-esque, right? So they would send out a remote control car, but they would only send the car. And then they would say, if you want the remote,
right?
Yeah, right, exactly. You know,
Yeah, I think that makes your customer look like he's kind of like he's like the dog wanting a biscuit, right?
Right.
I don't think it's respectful.
It's a bit of a hostage negotiation,
Right.
kind of feeling to it.
Yeah, I'll ring the bell. You salivate. You get
Exactly right, and then I get to come in and I give you the remote control. You know, the thing about that was that they would take the meeting, but just to get the remote control, and because they wanted it for their kid or whatever, right? And so they could do that, but there was no connection there, right? They were kind of playing off the idea that, well, these the CIOs and things like that, they, kind of on the whole, the generalization back then at least was that they like to kind of play around with random stuff, and that's how they kind of got their ideas for this or the other thing, whatever. I don't know. It's kind of like the ping pong table in the startup office, right? I mean, that was kind of the understanding that people had, but
it's kind of disrespectful.
It's that, and it's not really effective, because the thing about the way that you do it is that you're sending something that is actually that pertains to the service being offered, so that when somebody actually takes a meeting, they're saying, oh, it's because I'm interested in what you have to say, not because I want to finish off, not because I want the other part to this remote control.
Right. And it's kind of like you somehow you recognize the pain that I'm having.
Right.
We have a connection. I want to learn more.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's also the sequence of events too. So I'm not a big fan of incentive-based marketing, meaning if you have this appointment with me, I'll give you this thing. Right. Why are they showing up? They're showing up for the thing and not the appointment. But you've switched the value around. You've given them something of value that pertains to them that leads to interest in having an appointment. Right. I have a client right now that ran some campaigns on LinkedIn, and they were giving away this free Yeti cooler thing. And I'm like, don't do it.
No.
Don't do it. And sure enough, crystal ball, right? Most of the appointments were not qualified, not good, and a lot of no-shows. But they got their thing. They got the little piece of swag. So flip the value around.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, and whenever I talk about dimensional direct mail to somebody that doesn't really know, hasn't gone even this far into the conversation, they're like, yeah, I'll send them a water bottle with my logo on it, and I'll send them a cap. It's like, no.
Yeah. Right.
No, you won't.
Yeah. If you're going to give them a trade show, that's fine, but that's not of any value in this scenario, right?
Exactly.
Oh,
That's it. I mean, there's, there's purpose to it. Like I sent out, I've got the Mission Suite mugs, and of course I don't have one right now, but in front of me, but I've got a Mission Suite mug. It's a nice mirror mug that's, it's a solid thing. And, I sent it to clients and partners and whatnot. And it was a really successful campaign. Right. And but it's because people already knew who I was. People already knew who Mission Suite was. I wasn't
liked
trying to
you.
introduce something new with a clever tagline that made them because taglines are great again if people know who you are, but you need more than that. If something lands on my desk without me knowing anything more about you than meet your sales assistant or whatever the line is.
Well, and hopefully you know enough about them already to know that they're probably experiencing some level of pain that you can help them with.
Mm-hmm.
So then it stings. They're like, wow, yeah, I probably need to talk to this person.
Right.
I mean, I have even in all of the years that I've owned a business, one time a man sent me something similar to what I do. And right away, I critiqued it and I thought, well, he could have done a little better here or a little better there. I took a meeting with him, and I not only took one meeting, I took 3 meetings with him.
Mm-hmm.
I liked him. He understood my industry. He was a financial coach specifically for creative shops like mine. And
wow.
I mean, I honestly was considering him, and then he figured out that I didn't need him. And so he said, Nancy, you don't need me. You're doing okay.
That's great.
But basically it worked for him, right?
Right. Exactly.
He got some good advice from someone.
That's it. Well, that's the thing, is that I mean, like you said before, these things aren't about getting the sale, right? They're not about making a sale. They're about getting in front of somebody and starting a conversation.
Right.
And the second that you start thinking about direct mail or direct response, whatever you want to call it, direct marketing, as getting the sale, then it's that's when it seems to be that's when it all falls apart.
Well, I think it just depends on what it is that you're selling. I mean, when this is a personal relationship you're going to try to build, it's a door opener.
Mm-hmm.
But other forms of direct marketing are definitely sales oriented.
Yeah, right. So can you give us some examples of what that? Dean, were you going to say something?
I'm just going to make a comment that in the B2B professional services world, it's the prior, right? It's the door opener, right. Relationship builder. If you're in a consumer product business, right, like you mentioned earrings or a lower dollar, lower risk purchase, you can go right for the sale. But I think for most of our audience, B2B services, higher ticket offers, it's a different play.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think also there's another type of direct marketing that we don't really consider or we don't think about, and that's telemarketing. And if you really can build rapport immediately when you as a telemarketer, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you're just reading a script, you're going to fail.
Yeah. So you would add this sort of outbound calling, for example, as direct marketing too. That sort of falls into what your bucket is, because it's that one-to-one direct message, human to human.
And they know, and they have a list that that fits the demographic that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Targeted.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't remember if I ever told either of you guys this, but I owned a telemarketing company for about 6 months, something like that. Back in San Diego. It was, I mean, that was in fact, that was the company that made me make a decision that I was never going to own an employee, a company that relies so much on staff and staffing, right? Because building a team is one thing, but when you have a company that requires staffing, just kind of funneling people in, it's a whole different monster. But to your point, Nancy, about good telemarketers, if they've internalized the script, if they have really created it as something that they get and they understand and they know how to talk to the people, then it can be really well done. The challenge is that that's incredibly rare in the telemarketing world. Right. Is that finding those people, finding those companies that actually do those that train their telemarketers like that and take the time with them and not just drop a button, a seat, and throw a headset on them and give them their login to VanillaSoft, right? It's a whole different world. So I'm curious, how have you seen, as you think about that with telemarketing, adding that into kind of a campaign, how have you seen that work really well?
I've seen it work really well with nonprofits.
Okay.
Personally, I will contribute to responder nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen, because I believe that we need to support our responders. And typically I'll get a phone call and it will be because they're doing an event to help, kids in the community that are underserved. Mm-hmm. And every single one of them, I've contributed to DPD, Aurora. I don't live in Aurora, but I get phone calls from these guys, and they just know how to capture my emotions. They are very comfortable, and they treat me with a lot of respect. And it's just, and if I say, hey, I can't do it this week, call me back in 2 weeks. Call me back in 2 weeks. I'll give them a credit card.
Yeah.
So, and I know other nonprofits can do the same. I mean, I have a ton of nonprofit clients.
Sure.
And so I know that they can do it well, and they have an emotional appeal, right?
Yeah. It's funny. So I've got, remember one time back when I was probably about 21, 22, something like that. I was back when we actually had house phones. I had just put my cordless phone. Yeah, right. I actually put my cordless phone on the charger next to my bed, which is a statement that nobody makes anymore. I was waiting for somebody to call me back, and the phone started ringing, and I went to run to the phone. I stubbed my toe on my bed, landed on the bed, grabbed the phone, and accidentally hit the button. And the guy and somebody on the other line says hello, and I said, what? And instead of being offended, instead of just going into a space, he stops at, are you okay? Aww. And I'm like, man, I just stubbed my toe. I'm sorry. He's like, oh man, that's brutal. Are you all right? You don't think anything's broken? Because I'm actually calling because of, and I don't remember what responder organization it was, but it was something back in Rochester, and it was the funniest way to resolve a stubbed toe, right? And I mean, but
the money.
What's that?
Did you give him money?
Well, I was 22. I didn't have any money, but but I mean, it was just like those types of things that can really make an impact on telemarketing, and realistically any sort of direct marketing, right? Exactly. I mean, if you're doing any sort of direct marketing, and if you can figure out how to lower the guard a little bit, you can at least get a conversation.
That's it.
Yeah.
Bingo.
It's a huge, I mean, with all the automation and bots and whatever else that are out there this year, and it's one of my themes, is that human to human contact, human messaging. Like, be a person, right? If you can't make 1,000, dials or whatever this week, it's okay. The few you can, be a real person, be yourself. Yeah. So Nancy does a really great job in creating the imagery and the messaging that communicates the style of the sender, right? So I know who Ian is when I get something from Ian. I would already know that, and I think that's the other piece that's really important, is aligning your style with your audience, right? And making sure there's a connection there too. Absolutely.
So I'm curious, Nancy, if you can kind of give us I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second, because I know you're good there. But I'm curious if you can give us kind of an example of how, because we talked about telemarketing, mail, advertising, all these things. If you can kind of give us a sense of what, because again, we're talking mostly to B2B people here. on these sessions. So I'm wondering if you can kind of give us a sense of how somebody can put all of these things into into a cohesive campaign. And maybe Dean, you can chime in on this too, just as you kind of think about it, like, what would that look like? Where would we start? Do we start with advertising? Do we start with the mail piece? Do we start with, whatever? And then how would it progress from a campaign perspective to make something really successful for again, we're talking mostly to B2B professional service providers?
First thing that comes to my mind is cost. I might start out with the most cost-effective piece of it first, so we can afford to do testing. So by the time we progress into all the other stages and have a consistent campaign, because it becomes more memorable as it goes, then I think you can spend more and get more higher response out of your spend as you go.
Yep.
So and usually I think I'm betting that means some sort of social advertising or something like that.
Probably social, and then into digital.
Okay.
I'm not going to recommend telemarketing to just anybody.
Sure.
I think you could add maybe a lower cost direct mail piece. I think in a lot of cases it could even be a postcard. And then once you get to the volume of response that you can see that it's clicking and you've tweaked it to where it's successful, then you could go to something dimensional.
Okay.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be the book in the box level. I did a campaign for the Anschutz Women's Center at University Hospital. They had a program where it was women's health. They had 3 different sessions that you were invited to attend, 200 women per session. We started out with a save the date, which was a cloth napkin in a plastic wrapper with a postcard, which took them to a page they could register. And then we sent them a Demitas spoon to the ones that hadn't responded that we had originally in our list. And so that upped the responses, and we filled every seat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there that I hear, Nance. One is being clear on your offer, knowing what you want out of that activity, right? You want your audience to respond in a very specific way, right? And so in this case, it was RSVP, right? That was the whole point. And so everything was built around getting them to RSVP. The message, the gift, the positioning of the event, it was all about that. And I think that's where sometimes people fall down, is they're too generic in their messaging. They don't really, do they want them to click on a website? Do we want to download? Should we sell them something? And if you're confused and you're creating the offer, what do you think the audience is thinking, right? And I don't know what to do. Yeah. So and the other thing I would say is give them one thing to do. Don't give them an option. Do these, pick one of the, give them one thing to do that's really easy for them to execute on.
Yep.
As soon as we see more than one option, we have to start processing. You've lost them. So keep it really, really simple that way.
Or they put it aside. They can't decide which one they want to do. They put it aside and never happens.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. What about multi-channel direct marketing? So we've talked about all these individual channels, email, social, digital, direct mail, text messaging, list goes on and on. How do you think about tying different channels together, especially online and offline? So let's say direct mail with some kind of email or something like that.
Oh, totally. And I think that's kind of what I was thinking when I answered the previous question, is intermix it all.
Yeah.
So they're seeing it in several places.
Yeah. There's a technique online called remarketing. We know what it is, but for the audience, basically what it means is we're tracking you online. We know your activity. And if you've gone to the Mission Suite website, for example, we know you're interested. We know you're interested in CRM. So we're going to show you ads about Mission Suite wherever you go on the internet. And so utilizing retargeting or remarketing is really important especially when you're doing digital. A lot of retailers don't do a good enough job with this, where I put stuff in my cart, I get distracted, I forget about it. But if I saw an ad for that same e-tailer, like that e-commerce company saying, don't forget, you got the thing in the cart, go back, I'd probably go back and buy it. So we can use that in B2B services too. It could be that somebody went to your event web page, but they didn't RSVP. We can retarget them with an ad saying, don't forget, we've got this thing coming up. And that's that like frequency and staying top of mind. So there's a lot of tools now. While the fundamentals of direct marketing haven't changed, our tools have expanded dramatically, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nancy, do you use remarketing in your in retargeting in your campaigns too?
Yeah, probably mostly in social, with especially with nonprofits. When we're asking for donations, then definitely we do. We're always, that's how they survive, by donations or grants, and donations are better. Grants run out.
Right.
So yeah, we do.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Let's see here. So just going back to our kind of conversation the other day here. So we talked about some of the ways to use direct marketing. We talked about the fundraising, kind of opening up conversations. Is there anything else that we should be thinking about as we think about why we should why we should be thinking about using direct marketing as service providers and whatnot? Anything else come to mind from either one of you?
I think when it comes to mail, I think we all can see that our mailboxes are not as full as they used to be. So I think the timing for mail is good.
Let's talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind. Kind of dive in on that a little bit, because I mean, I only check my mailbox like once a week, so my mailbox is always full. But but for most people who don't have a mailbox that's a mile away, your point is well taken, that we do go through these cycles with direct response in a lot of ways, right? That, right now there's there's opportunity where people aren't doing other things, right? And mail is probably one of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
I think you could do a progressive mailing, where every month you could change up the format. I think a quick message is okay on a postcard, but I think you need to take it beyond that for B2B.
Yeah.
I think again, a handwritten envelope is going to get opened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think that the other thing that we can use direct mail for is nurturing. Right.
Yeah.
It's that it could be that progressive approach. It could be, but if you've got either, let's say in our B2B world, right, we've got referral partners, or we've got prospects, or we've got maybe even clients. You can use a sequence of gifts, if you will, inexpensive gifts as a nurture, just a top of mind thing. So I can send you an email. You see emails from me, whatever, right? It's not really memorable, but if you got over a 4 or 6 month period, each month you got a little box of candy or something. It doesn't have to be expensive. It's just like it's presented well, it's on brand, it's fun, it's unique. That's going to be memorable. And so using that to sort of nurture and build relationships, maybe they're already buying from you, maybe not. That's a really powerful way to go. There are services like Gift Hopper is one that comes to mind, where you can just set up your campaign. You can pick your stuff.
Right.
They'll put it in a box on brand, and you can adjust your list on a weekly or monthly basis, and get people get into their mailbox on a regular basis. And I've been the recipient of a couple of those campaigns, and it's just that nice human feeling, like, wow, Joe Blow thought of me this month, and it's kind of a nice thing. So, you take the candy home to the kids, or it gets shared in the office or whatever. It's more memorable, right? Than just that email. Just check it in. That doesn't move the dial.
Well, and it's dimensional, right? It makes me think of a Christmas card that we sent as a company several years ago that our phones blew up, and it was funny. And so we continued to do that year after year. But this one was, I wrote a ransom note and it was, of course, it wasn't signed, because who signs a ransom note? But it was this person thing had kidnapped Santa Claus. And so we went to the local thrift store and found a Santa's beard. And so we cut a chunk of his beard and taped it to the ransom note. And then we said, if you don't have a happy holiday, old Mickey's going to die.
Yeah.
and so we crumpled it up in a ball and stuck it in a box and mailed it, a little box, and mailed it to all of our clients. And I'm not kidding you, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. And people just thought it would. And so do something fun.
Yeah.
And just make somebody's day. If they're having a shitty day and they get something that makes them laugh, boy,
memorable.
they're never going to forget you.
Memorable.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
You got to have guts to do that.
Yeah. So a good friend of Phil Pelto, who's the founder of Firestorm, it's a networking organization out in Denver. He was telling me a story. Most people that know Phil know, or people that have listened to his pod, like the podcast that he and I used to do together, or what have you. People know that he used to sell suits, right? And he told me the story of his most successful marketing effort in selling suits was it was one person that responded, and it was the biggest order that he ever had. And it was basically, he took the letter, he wrote out a letter, a full letter, and then crumpled it up, and then smoothed it back out again and folded it up, and then put it in the envelope. And then and then he sent it. And apparently the first line of the letter was, I pre-crumpled this for you to hopefully save you some time if you just want to get rid of it. And then he went into his whole pitch afterwards. And again, you'd have to talk. I mean, you'd have to talk to him. He's pretty widely available to connect with, being the founder of the Firestorm. But you'd have to ask him any further details of it. But I mean, like, things like that are brilliant ways to, like you said, make people laugh, like, or even just kind of like well, he's right, whatever. But I mean, at least put a smile on somebody's face, or like a half smirk on someone's face, and just because it's gonna, if nothing else, it'll make you memorable.
And it cuts through the tension of selling.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. That's an excellent point that I feel like I feel like is a one we don't want to skimp on here, because you're right. That's huge. Selling is, and it's very, as a salesperson, especially as a professional service provider, selling in and of itself is an anxiety-filled activity for a lot of, unless they're working with Dean and have figured out how to do it smoothly. but it can be really, really filled with anxiety if you don't know how to, do it in a way that doesn't make you feel kind of icky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you sent somebody something like that and then you placed a phone call to them, or they called you, my God, that would be a gift.
Yeah.
You would, it'll make everything a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this: Do you recommend that if you were to do like a dimensional mailing, or even a progressive mailing kind of a thing, where you did a postcard and then a letter and then a dimensional, that kind of a deal, at what point do you recommend people make phone calls? Because we also know that direct mail in and of itself has a low conversion rate unless you actually act on the stuff that you're doing, right?
Right. Well, I can say first and foremost that the dimensional mailing, most 9 times out of 10 requires a phone call, and the person knows they're going to receive a phone call.
Okay.
I mean, I have had clients that are like, I can't make that phone call. So we handle it differently. We handle it in a way like if you're at a networking meeting and you meet someone that you'd really like to have an appointment with, you say, Dean, is it okay if I send you something? And then maybe we can talk about it. And that helps relieve that anxiety right there. So, I wouldn't take it too far, but if you're going to add social media or digital in with that mix of direct mail, I think I'd wait till you have the grandest thing that you're going to send them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
I
don't
agree.
call after like 5 days after each thing goes out then.
No, yeah. Blow up the phone. No.
Right.
I think that especially if you've got a campaign, right? Multiple touch points. The hope is that they've seen and maybe remembered at least your name or your brand or something.
Yes.
So that when you get to that sort of the right point in the campaign, not only are they going to be more willing to talk to you, they're going to remember why they were going to talk to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's part of this messaging, is reinforcing the why. There has to be some value in them having that conversation.
Right.
And even in one of those messages, you can say, I'm not a big fan of asking permission necessarily, but letting them know, hey, I'm going to do this thing.
Right.
Right. And at least they can expect that. Now, the key there is if you say you're going to do it, you better do it.
Right. Exactly.
If you don't, you've just lost credibility with them.
Exactly.
So,
well, and I think the final piece of that, and I think that's very smart, Dean. I'd help you with a script. So when you do make that phone call, humanize that script.
That's so important.
And I remember talking to somebody one time about the dimensional mailing thing. And this was somebody that I know was very uncomfortable making phone calls afterwards. So I said, okay, well then, maybe you use it differently. Maybe instead of using it as a client, as a direct to client or direct to prospect kind of cultivating thing, send it out to referral partners and ask them, hey, do you mind, I would like, here's a book that I have that whatever, blah, blah, blah. Do you mind? Who in your network should I send this to? If you can make a connection with me on LinkedIn, then I'll send it to them too, and then have a conversation, and then maybe have a conversation, that kind of a thing, which again gives you kind of an end run into not only a referral, but a significantly easier conversation. Right. Obviously, it's got to be done the right way, but I mean, it's something that can be done. Even if you're not the one that wants to make the phone call.
And we have built those types of strategies for clients as well to help them ease the pain of selling.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Maybe we need to do one on do a community table on the fear of selling, right?
That's not a bad idea.
I'm hearing a theme here, guys, right?
Right, seriously, man.
Yeah, because most of us that have our own businesses, we have a craft or we have a specialty or we have a knowledge. We're not salespeople.
Yeah.
I'm not a salesperson.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we are getting close to this 4:30 area, 4:30 Eastern time anyway, and we're getting close to the 60 minutes. And so I want to kind of wrap up with just some kind of quick things. First of all, Nancy, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
BarlowAdvertising.com, LinkedIn, Facebook, Insta.
All over the place.
We can find you.
635-5956.
I mean, we should actually pick up the phone and call you?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
How does that work?
And nb@barlowadvertising.com.
There you go. Beautiful. So and again, as someone who has known Nancy for a while, I know that she is eminently accessible. So here we got a question from Brandon here real quick before we wrap up. For high-end service sales, expected closing timelines that you've seen over the years. It's an interesting question.
Wow. That varies.
Yeah.
I would say, probably an average would be 3 weeks.
Okay. Dean, you want to chime in on
Yeah,
that?
my response is it depends on what you mean by high value or high cost, right? It could be
True.
1 day to 1 year, right? I mean,
That's
it just
true.
it
For
varies.
sure.
It really varies. In professional services, B2B services, I would say if you're reaching out to a prospect that doesn't know you well and you've got to go through the whole thing, 30 to 45 days
Yeah.
of nurturing and getting needs analysis done and proposals and back and forth. But there are times where I've had one phone call with a prospect and they're like, here's my credit card.
Yeah.
Right. It varies so much. So I think there's more to that than the question is allowing. So,
Right.
so Brandon, if you have questions, reach out. I'm happy to answer them for you
There you
directly
go.
if that's helpful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Nancy, last parting thought. If you could leave everybody with one last thought here for today, what would that thought be?
Try to find your uniqueness and express that in a very human way.
I like it. Very cool. Dean, what about you?
I'll take advantage of Nancy's wisdom and say that, and then align that with how your prospect thinks about the problem they're trying to solve. So your uniqueness has to align with how the problem they're trying to solve. And if you can figure that magic out, your conversion rate will go through the roof.
Awesome. Beautiful. Well, Dean, Nancy, thank you both so much for being here. To everybody attending here in the live session, thank you for being here. To everybody watching the recording, thanks for watching it, and thanks for watching all the way to the end. And I look forward to hearing more. If you need stuff in the comments, definitely just let us know, and we will be sure to get as many answers as we can for you. So with that, I will say happy Wednesday, and we'll talk to you very soon. Cheers.
Thank you both. I enjoyed it greatly.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.